You think you need a peaceful life to feel peaceful, but the truth is, it works the other way around. There's a version of being alive where nothing really knocks you off center. Whatever's happening around you, whatever noise or disruption is moving through the day, something in you stays steady. Not numb, just settled. That's the thing we're looking at today. 7 observations from Buddhist practice about how stillness actually shows up in ordinary life. 1. There's something about the breath that people keep coming back to, not as an idea, as an experience. You're somewhere in the middle of a difficult afternoon. Your mind has already jumped ahead to 3 things that could go wrong. The body's tense. And then without much ceremony, you notice the breath, just that. Air coming in, the chest rising slightly, air going out, everything slows just enough. This is what Buddhist practice has recognized for a long time. The breath is always here, not in the memory of this morning or the worry about tomorrow evening, right here in this moment. When you sit with it, actually pay attention to it, something in the nervous system settles down. The racing quality of thought softens a little, not because you solved anything, just because attention moved. There's a phrase from the tradition: breathing in, there's a calming of the body. Breathing out, something like ease. Nothing is promised. But that small movement of attention, back to the physical fact of the breath, creates a gap. And inside that gap, it becomes possible to see a situation more clearly before deciding how to respond to it. Next time something starts to pile up, try just stopping for one breath. Not to fix anything, just to be present with what's here. That one breath can shift the whole quality of what comes next. 2. The mind has a habit of framing things. Something happens. Before you've even fully registered what it was, a story is already forming around it. This is bad. This is wrong. This is unfair. The framing arrives so fast it can feel like the truth of the situation. But it isn't. It's just the first interpretation the mind reached for. Buddhist practice pays a lot of attention to this. The teaching isn't that you should force yourself to feel positive when something's genuinely hard. That's not it. It's more that the framing is negotiable. You can look at the same situation again from a different angle, ask different questions. Not what went wrong, but what this is showing you. Not why is this happening to me, but where does this lead? There's something in the old teaching about this, the idea that experience is shaped by how the mind meets it. What you think, you tend to become, not in some magical sense. Just that the angle you keep returning to tends to become the angle you see from. The mind trains itself without realizing it. So when a thought comes in with a heavy charge, this is a disaster, this is too much, it's worth pausing long enough to ask if that's really the only way to hold it. Sometimes it is. But often there's another way of meeting the same thing that doesn't cost as much. 3. Feelings move through. That's what they do. The problem isn't having them. The problem is the way they can take over. When something moves through you and you go with it all the way, until it's difficult to tell where the feeling ends and where you begin. That's the place where reactions happen that you didn't quite choose. What Buddhist practice notices is that there's a difference between feeling something and being pulled along by it. You can feel anger without the anger making your decisions. You can feel anxiety without the anxiety running the next hour. It takes some practice to even notice the difference. But once you do, something shifts. The old analogy is water. Waves don't stop because you stop paying attention to them, but you don't have to be in the wave to notice that it's there. There's a quality of observation, seeing the feeling rise, letting it exist, watching it start to ease, that doesn't require you to either suppress it or surrender to it. That's what emotional detachment actually looks like in practice. Not coldness, not distance, just enough space between the feeling and the response to choose what comes next. One question that can help in the moment: is this feeling guiding me towards something useful, or is it just running? That's enough of a pause to keep most situations from escalating. 4. Challenges look different depending on how you're holding them. That's not an optimistic thing to say. It's just observationally true. The same set of circumstances, met with different internal orientation, produces different experiences. The difficulty doesn't change. What changes is what you do with it. Buddhism doesn't teach that life should be easy or that difficulty is a sign something went wrong. The first noble truth is literally the acknowledgement that difficulty is part of being alive. The question is whether you meet it with resistance or with something more open. There's an image that keeps coming up in the tradition: water and stone. Water doesn't push against the rock. It finds the way through or around or over, not through force, through consistency. That quality, steady, patient, non-resistant, is what allows movement where force would only create friction. When you're in the middle of something genuinely hard, the question isn't how to make it stop. The question is what this particular difficulty has to show you. Not every challenge teaches something transformative, but most do teach something. Patience, maybe, or where your actual priorities are. Or simply the fact that you can move through something you weren't sure you could move through. Without that reframe, a hard thing stays just a hard thing. With it, the same experience becomes part of something larger. 5. The grip is where the energy goes. Sit with that for a second. Think about the last time you were really stressed about something you couldn't change. Maybe it was what someone else was going to do. Maybe it was an outcome still days away. All that energy, moving into something you had no actual influence over. Buddhist teaching is direct about this. Suffering comes from clinging to outcomes, to how things should be, to the version of reality we're insisting on. The tighter the grip, the more is spent on something that doesn't yield. There's a physical image that captures it well. If you hold sand in an open hand, it stays. Tighten the fingers and it moves through the gaps. The very effort of holding causes the loss. Control works like that too. The more you chase it over things that don't yield to chasing, the more exhausted you become. This isn't passive. There's a distinction between what responds to your attention and what doesn't. Your own choices respond. Your actions respond. The quality of your attention responds. But other people's decisions, the past, the way something already unfolded, these don't yield to pressure. And recognizing that boundary isn't giving up. It's accurate. When something stressful comes up, one honest question: is this something I can actually affect? If yes, direct the energy there. If no, that's the place to practice something harder than action, which is release. Holding on to what's already moved through is carrying weight that doesn't have to be carried. 6. Gratitude changes what the mind notices, not because anything in the outer situation shifts, but because attention is selective. The mind can only hold so much at once. And whatever you keep returning to tends to grow larger in your experience of things. When attention moves mostly toward what's missing, toward complaint, toward the gap between how things are and how they should be, that gap starts to feel like the whole picture. And the rest, the things that are actually present and working and good, becomes background noise. Gratitude is the practice of bringing that background into focus, not as denial, not as a performance of positivity, just as a deliberate act of noticing what's here. Buddhism connects this directly to mindfulness. When you're actually present with experience rather than running commentary on it, small things become visible. The temperature of a drink, light changing through a window, the sound of someone's voice who is still here. These things were always present. Gratitude is the quality of attention that catches them. A practice that stayed in many traditions for a reason. At some point in the day, name 3 things that are real and present and don't require improvement. Not grand things. Just things that are actually here. A warm room, a task completed, something that went quietly well. Over time, the mind starts doing this on its own. Not because the world has changed, but because the habit of attention has. Even in a genuinely difficult stretch, there's usually something small that holds. Noticing it doesn't erase the difficulty, but it changes the ratio, and that can be enough to keep a person moving. 7. The energy in a room isn't nothing. You felt this. You walk into a space where things are heavy between people, and something in you registers it before any words are spoken. You spend time with someone who's in genuine ease, and something in you settles a little. These things are real, and Buddhist teaching has always taken them seriously. The people you spend time with shape the field you're operating in, not by force, just by proximity. Energy is contagious in both directions. Anxiety moves into the room and tends to replicate itself. So does calm. The question is what you're spending your time in the presence of. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't mean cutting everyone difficult out of your life. That's often neither possible nor the point. It means noticing, honestly, how different presences land. There are conversations that leave you lighter. There are conversations that leave you hollowed out. Both kinds of relationship offer information. What Buddhism called spiritual friendship, good companions on the path, wasn't just about people being nice to each other. It was about genuine contact with people who are actually trying to move towards something real. Clarity, honesty, wakefulness. Being near that quality in someone else makes the same quality more available in you. Setting limits with people who consistently pull toward contraction isn't unkind. It's part of maintaining the conditions for your own steadiness. And being honest about where you put your time and attention is something that compounds over years. The environment matters too. The spaces you inhabit, the things you consume, what you look at and listen to, all of it registers somewhere. Not theoretically, actually. Cleaning something up, spending time in air that moves, choosing what comes through the screen, these are small choices with a real cumulative effect. And finally, the energy you are matters as much as the energy around you. Whatever you're carrying tends to move outward. The steadiness or agitation in you doesn't stay only in you. It touches everything you're near. That's where all of this eventually points, not to achieving some permanent state, just to noticing, moment to moment, where the quality of experience actually lives, and choosing, as often as you can, to meet it clearly.